Hi guys, this is Auburn here. I'm about to go out on a trip, so before I leave, I want to go over basically all the voltology signals as a general overview so that you guys have something as a reference for what exactly they are, especially those that I haven't described as explicitly as before. So here we go. Starting with Fi. Fi number 1 is resting tension. So resting tension is the tension that exists mostly around the nose right here. So a few things to note is that some people have that anatomy on its own, and it's hard to know whether or not the face is dynamically contracting upwards or if their facial anatomy is that way. So this is a very dangerous signal to overuse. You don't want to use just resting tension as a sign of Fi, because it could easily be, like in the case of Taylor Swift or many of the TISCs that we've come across, that's kind of how their mouth is shaped. So what you really want to go for here is not just tension going up towards the nose, but you also want to go for what I call like the H pattern of tautness. So you have going up here, but you also have a slight pull going down here and a splitting of the cheeks this way. So there's this H pattern to the way that the mouth contains itself, and it's vertical, so mostly the tension is going up and down in this vertical space around here. It's not doing this curtain effect as we see in Fe. Fi2 is snarling smile. Now that is how it looks when it's snarling or smiling due to that resting tension. So if, for example, if you see what you think is Fi1 resting tension, you want to wait until they smile to confirm. And if when they smile, the smile again is contained in this kind of vertical container here, like it should smile going up, right? So it's kind of a sneer. So snarling smile is kind of a sneer smile, right? Because it's the muscles that are pulling are the ones that are pulling up and down here, not so much to the sides. Although if they have a wide smile, it'll be wide, and yet it'll still have that H pattern. It's very difficult to explain it, but basically, even if it's wide instead of narrow, it'll still be doing this thing, this H pattern, instead of this sort of pattern. Fi number 3 is asymmetrical mouth. Now I also call this wobbling mouth. And basically what it is if you micro pause the video, like just pause it every second or so, I mean half a second even, you'll see that their mouth does these funny things where it goes like this, then like this, then like this, like this. It's constantly shifting shape as they're talking. And this sort of shifting shape is because of the way that the muscles of the mouth are not coordinated. And they're not coordinated the way that Fe's muscles are, because Fe is coordinated emotional expression, articulation. But Fi is not concerned with how it coordinates its emotions towards the external. It's tied into Ji, and it's tied into the emotional register in a personal way. So the wobbling will more reflect how they're vibrating internally than what the audience needs, and that will come across a little bit awkward and a little bit offbeat in person. So you'll see that their mouth will be a little bit awkward. Fi number 4 is unbridled radiation. You look for the radiation of emotion at the body level, torso, head, and arms. So to use some understandable language, it's almost a feminine expression. So for example, what I just did right there, that's an example of the emotive expression just leaking out of a person. Sometimes it's this delicate, frail going into themselves. Sometimes it's whimsically looking off to the side. But basically their body is just caught up and consumed in what it's feeling, and it bubbles out and it radiates outward without a filter, without coordination. Oppositely, when FE gives a presentation, an emotional directive, there's usually some understanding of how it's going to come across. There is a collaborative element to FE's emotive expression. Even if the collaboration is directing them towards understanding something in a negative way, like, that was totally stupid, man, you should not have done that. That itself is a kind of direction, and it's still interpersonal. With FI, it's more like, oh, how does that make me feel? How does that... So there's a little bit of like, the head might sag to the side, the shoulders might sink to the sides, the arms might shrivel. All of that is part of unbridled radiation. And you mostly only see this with Seelys. So this is actually a Seely FI signal. You won't see this with unseely FIs. FI5 is giddy giggling, and that's pretty self-explanatory. So FI has very unordinary giggling, and that's part of the unordinary emotive expression that it has. So, for example, it could be very loud chuckles, or it could be super, super fast, like almost chipmunk level, high-pitched chuckles. Or it could be any variety in between. It could be deep, it could be high, it could be long, it could be short, but it's usually not coordinated to the environment. So I don't want to embarrass myself with giving expressions, but you can see some of them in the videos that I've linked for this one. FI6 is sprite-like voice. This is kind of on par with the unbridled radiation. It's an expression of the unbridled radiation in the voice level. So what you see is there's an airy quality to the voice. It's forlorn, it's affected. So there's affect. Let me see. Liza Minnelli, especially when she was younger, perfect example of what I'm talking about. There's this, almost like there's a whisper in the voice, and everything seems to hurt, and everything seems to affect them, but it can also be playful. It doesn't have to be wounded. That's another signal going forward. FI7 is excessive contempt. This is more of an unseely signal. So I have to differentiate this from contempt in general. So contempt is an Ekman signal, and that's listed as EK7, and that is exactly that. I don't care about them, whatever, F them, or that is contempt. It's moral superiority, right? Now, where FI differs is as FI is talking, this is happening unconsciously multiple times, not necessarily timed. You want to look at the timing, not necessarily timed to a moment that would warrant the judgment being explicitly communicated. So if they're talking, suddenly this will be happening, right? Like this. They'll be talking, and then they're talking about their friend, and that's excessive contempt. It's a little different from wobbling mouth. So wobbling mouth is more contained around this area. Excessive contempt kind of involves this cheek, this kind of, right? So, for example, coordinated contempt would be like if somebody says, "Oh, what do you think of Frank?" I don't care for Frank. See, that was timed to the question of what do you think of Frank? And the signal corresponds to the need to make a judgment about Frank. And that's not how FI does excessive contempt. Excessive contempt for FI is just kind of, just happens. FI8 is wounded expression, and this manifests a little bit like Ekman's EK2, which is sadness. And basically, sadness is described as the eyes look a little like this. There is an FI resting tension that still has sorrow within it, like a little bit of a I don't know, a pinch. And the eyes look a little bit, I don't want to say scared, but a little bit disconcerted. Now, this happens as part of FI's emotional radiation. If they feel a certain way about something, that's going to be the expression that's going to be kind of constantly on their face, especially if that's just how they are. This is more prominent with high FIs. The last two signals are kind of compound qualia signals, but I can break them down more or less. So Fi9 is Seelie energy. So in some sense, this is the combination of unbridled radiation, giddy giggling, and sprite-like voice. But there's more to it than that. Those are just three examples of what Seelie energy is like. But Seelie energy as a whole is this tendency to be agreeable. It's an agreeable Fi that is, so usually the voice is a little bit higher pitch. The energy is a little bit more free in expression. So for example, it's with Seelie energy, you'll see that there's a lack of callousness to how things are said, and also there's a receptiveness of the body to the other party, even though they're still their own person. They're not trying to move the other party, they're not trying to make a dynamic between them, but they are open, they're permeable. This permeability manifests a little bit in the unbridled expression of the body, sinking and sagging, a little bit in the affect of the voice, and a little bit in the wounded expression of the face. Now, as a whole, you have to look at all these signals and make a call whether or not they overall have Seelie energy or unseelie energy. So Fi10, unseelie energy, responds to the signals excessive contempt, a little bit of snarling smiles, depending on how it is, and some of the TE signals, which we'll get to later, such as nasal monotone voice and snippy head nods and snippy shoulder shrugs. So, snippy head nods and shoulder shrugs, just that sort of thing. And again, this. So if somebody's doing this all the time, like that's unseelie energy in some sense. But also, if the voice is just constantly a little bit annoying, like pinched, and all they do is kind of have this sass to them, then that's kind of an indicator of unseelie energy. The sass in the voice is a barrier. It gets pinched as part of the closedness of the person, the lack of permeability. In some ways, Fi is always permeable, but there's because they are permeable, and they don't stop being permeable, but because unseelie Fis are permeable, they want to fend off the threats, right? They want to, so they try to put this coat around it to defend themselves. So it's not that they stop feeling or caring or loving. It's that they feel so much, they care so much that they have to kind of find a way to set their boundaries.